Hey y'all, I'm Byron.
And I'm Margaret, and we'd like to welcome you back to the Beyond I Do podcast. In December 2017, Lauren Herschel tweeted an analogy for grief that was shared with her by her doctor. Imagine a box with a button at the bottom in a big ball. The button represents pain due to grief. When something traumatic happens, the ball, or grief, is huge. Because it is so big, it nearly fills the box and is constantly hitting the pain button. Over time, the ball gets smaller and has more room to move around the box without hitting the button as often. Even though it doesn't happen as much, when the ball does hit the button, the pain is there and hurts just like when the ball was bigger. Like the ball in the box, grief will always be there, and occasionally you will feel pain due to grief. Fortunately, with time and healing, we can learn to cope with grief during the times when the ball does hit the button. In this episode, we'll be discussing how we've supported each other when dealing with grief, loss, and trauma. Before we get into our episode, we want to share this disclaimer. We are not marriage counselors, nor are we mental health professionals. We simply want to share with you what has worked in our marriage. Now, on to our episode.
All right. Over time, we've realized that major traumatic experience in our past can negatively impact our marriage. Sometimes we had to support each other in dealing with issues that happened before we even knew each other. For me, there were a few major events that had an impact on my life and eventually my marriage. The first one was my mother's father, and that was probably the earliest death I remember experiencing. I remember going to my pop's house. It was an area in the city. My grandpa, my sister lived next door. I had my mother's aunts lived on the other side of my sister, and my mother's sister lived behind my grandpa. So we would go visit them on the weekend, and we would see everybody. I would be in and out of each other's houses. Auntie had the frozen cups and all the good treats and stuff. Grandpa had the candy. My sister had the chicken on deck or whatever, Sometimes we'd stay there all day or whatever. But I remember Pop, he used to smoke a cigar. I used to love the smell of that cigar, man. That was something. And just, he would always talk to us, give us good words of wisdom. And I don't know, I think I was probably 6 or 7 maybe. I was real young when he passed away. And I just remember, he was here and then he was gone. I don't know exactly what happened. I do remember, the time that during the funeral, I just remember staying at my sister's house. 'Cause I guess I was, young to be there or whatever. And I just remember that day being, it was raining. It was raining that day. And that was a sad day. But, after Pop passed away, I remember going down there, and it wasn't the same. It was kind of like, I don't know, I would go to his house and, I always look over there, wanting to go knock on the door. And he was married to another woman who wasn't my grandmother. And I would go over there because I did have some type of relationship with her, but it was kind of strange because most of the time I was going to see him. And I just remember, like, years later, she remarried, and I felt anger because this man was driving my pop's car. I remember seeing it leave out the driveway one time, and it was this man driving my pop's car, and I was angry. But I mean, I couldn't do anything about it, but, it was just like...
With you being that young, did anybody explain what was going on?
They did explain, but it was just, Papa's gone on to heaven now. And that was, I mean, he was sick and, he lived his life, and that was pretty much it.
I just know, like, a lot of times with younger kids, especially our generation, nobody really took the time to explain things to us.
Right, yeah.
Especially in a way that we could process it, and so we had to kind of fill in the gaps or whatever.
Yeah. And I, looking back on it, like I think about, the deaths that we've experienced, and our kids were young, and we didn't involve them either because they were so young as far as like having them at the funeral, except for when your mom passed.
Well, right. When they were, and also with relationships that they were close with.
Yeah.
Because those were the only deaths really that we experienced that affected them that way.
Oh yeah, that's true.
So I think that's one of the things as a parent I tried to make sure that I explained certain things. Now, of course, there are things that I feel like I could have explained better or differently looking back, and I think that's what parenting, that's what life is. You look back on things and figure out how they could have been done to get a different outcome.
Yeah.
But we didn't have any deaths that would have affected them that way until they were a little bit older.
Yeah, that's true.
So for me, my first major loss was also around that age. I was, I think I was around 6 years old, and my mom's younger sister, my Aunt Nessa, was murdered. I idolized her. She was beautiful. We spent a lot of time together. I was very attached to her. And not only the impact of losing her, but what it did to my family. I remember I have vivid memories of being in the family car with my uncles and seeing my uncles cry. And it was uncomfortable for me at that age. And the circumstances of her death were so horrible. So it was that was a difficult thing for my family. And then my mother's father, he and my grandmother were divorced the year I was born, so I never knew those grandparents together. But he had remarried someone who was younger, and they had a son, and he was 6 years younger than me, so my uncle was my little uncle, and we were very close. And he passed away when he was 14, and those two deaths at that young age, and me experiencing them at my young age, those were hard for me. And I just had it in my head that I was going to die young. And I made some pretty bad choices because I felt like the consequences didn't really matter because
destined to die young.
Right. I didn't think I was going to live to see 30. So I made some pretty poor choices, and then those choices coupled with not processing those deaths in a healthy way or processing them the way that I did, all of those things I've had to deal with. Once I realized the impact, I had to deal with those things.
I think thinking about it when we were writing this episode out, I don't know if there's a proper way to deal with grief as far as, you dealing with it on an individual level and helping your kids deal with it on their individual level, because you're grieving, they're grieving, and it's almost kind of like, well, how do I help them understand? And I don't understand. And
as we move through this episode and talk about the different things that we experienced and how they affected us, one thing that I have realized as an adult and with therapy is that I wasn't processing anything.
Yeah.
I was just burying stuff.
Yeah.
So I wasn't processing. I was experiencing things, be it good, bad, or indifferent, and then I was just acting on that experience. So having those deaths in my life impacted me in a way that I didn't necessarily process the grief and the emotional part of it. I just looked at it as a sign that I was going to die young. And so not processing the emotions. Both of those deaths, that was my mom's younger sister and her younger brother. And another thing that affected me is I ended up being her crutch in a way. And I was always, she looked to me to be strong for her. So she viewed me as a point of strength, and I took on that role. So there again, I wasn't necessarily focused on processing things myself because I knew I had to be strong for her.
Right.
And of course, that's not the way that the natural order of things should be, but that's how it was.
All right, so growing up, for me, I had two deaths that affected me. I experienced some deaths of like people that I knew, but I wasn't necessarily close to. But these two particular ones, first one, we was in the elementary school. I was in 5th grade, and young man that we were pretty close. We started out in kindergarten all the way to 5th grade together. That was one of our best friends throughout school. And I just remember, he was shot in town, and it was reported that it was over his, he had a Miami Hurricanes t-shirt on. And I remember him, he had the jacket on. I remember that was his favorite team. And I used to always mess with him about it because, that was one of the premier rap groups at that time was 2 Live Crew, and they wore the Miami Hurricane stuff. And I just remember used to mess with him, like, man,
2 Live Crew in 5th grade?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
What a heathen.
I just listened, we had the album cover. I mean, the tape cover. It was on the tape cover.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, they had that's what they had on, and then they had the jackets on in the videos or whatever, representing their town, whatever. So anyway, I just remember him, always wearing that jacket. I used to always mess with him, like, Mac, I'm gonna steal that jacket, man. But he was bigger than me, of course, so he let me try it on one day, and it was too big, of course. Anyway, so he was killed over his T-shirt. That's what the news report said, and I've heard little different stories since then. But that kind of bothered me because it was like, Friday, hey man, we'll see you Monday, and then come Monday, he's not there, and they had grief counselors, and I was one of his cousins was in my class, and he didn't come to school that Monday. They had grief counselors for us, of course, but that was kind of traumatic. And fast forward to high school, another friend was just the same situation. We from kindergarten all the way to probably 7th grade, because he ended up moving and going to another high school. But we maintained closeness with each other throughout the years, just calling each other, hey man, what's going on? And I remember getting the news report or getting a call from another friend who was like, hey man, you heard about what happened to such and such? And I was like, what? And he was killed at the bus stop one morning before school. And it was another young man. It was a situation involving a radio. And he shot him that morning and killed him. And, you know, that kind of affected me also. And it kind of let me... I felt like, you know, well, I could go at any time. That's when I realized, you know, I could go at any time. It could be something. So that hindered me from doing things a lot of times. Like throughout my teenage years and adult years, like people be like, hey man, it's a party at such and such, and I just had this, now I don't think I'm going to go to that, you know, or whatever. And sometimes, you know, I would say more times than none, stuff would happen. You know, it'd be a fight or shooting or something like that. So I had that kind of instinct, and it kind of helped me in that way, but I don't think that was healthy at all, you know.
I wonder if that's why when we heard gunshots at Crystal's, you ran and left me.
Oh, you want to bring that up?
It just occurred to me.
Oh, okay.
It just occurred to me.
Could be subconsciously. Could be. You know, never know. I didn't leave you though.
You ran and left.
I took a step behind the car.
Oh no, you ran off.
You know what? I didn't realize that you didn't grow up as hood as I did, so I just assumed that you already had that parameter taken care of. But my bad.
Well, I think that what happened was we were standing talking.
We talking about this episode. Why were we talking about it?
And you just ran and left me.
It had nothing to do with death.
I'm sorry. My bad. I digress. My bad. So I grew up in an environment that was somewhat chaotic and at times abusive. I had half siblings, but I grew up as an only child. I was the only child that my mom and dad had. It's the only child in the home. So in those times where things were chaotic or I felt like I didn't have any control over anything, I learned to make myself small and low maintenance. I would stay in my room, but not just in my room. Like I would be on the other side of the bed, between the wall and bed. I would sit there and I'd read, or that's where I would lay on the floor and I'd write and things like I made myself out of sight, out of mind. Mm-hmm. And I felt like I didn't want to make anything worse, make a situation worse,
right,
or cause any issues. And my physical needs were met. I had, you know, clothes, food, water, all those things, shelter. Mm. But the emotional and mental needs, that was lacking. And I think that, I think that some of that is generational. Our parents did the best that they could do with what they had. Mm. So for me, at a very young age, I started dealing with anxiety and panic attacks and issues with being nervous. And this was before that was a thing.
Yeah.
So I coped with those things. I learned to cope with those things on my own. Mm-hmm. Then at 16, the boy that I was dating at the time raped me, but I didn't tell anyone because I felt like, who would believe it? It's my boyfriend, so why would you say no to your boyfriend? That type of situation.
Yeah.
All of that combined, and like I said, the not dealing with emotions and learning how to block things out. I put up walls to keep people out, and eventually was diagnosed with depression and anxiety and PTSD. So all of those things had an impact on how I dealt with people, including you. And even though we were friends and we were close friends, and I was comfortable and I felt safe around you, And when we were married, I felt comfortable and safe, but there was still a lot that I didn't share with you because of whatever reason.
Right.
And so it made it difficult when I would react a certain way to things towards you, and you would think that it was because of you, when it was really because of experiences that I had had and not dealt with properly. I remember for a long time early in our marriage and when the kids were younger, I had a problem with physical touch. And there were times when the physical touch, somebody could put their hands on my arm and it would physically hurt me. And for you, I know that was hard for you to deal with and not understanding. But then I just think about the kids, because if they came up to me and caught me off guard and I jumped away from them, I mean, I know that that affected them.
Yeah.
And we've talked about it now that they're older. We've talked about it and they understand exactly why. But that doesn't replace what happened to them and how they felt in those moments. So
I know, like I felt like, I know with me, you know, growing up the way that I grew up, being the youngest child, I was kind of like, you know, mostly unseen. So I know that, you know, I'm going to find something to do to keep myself busy so I don't bother them. Even though I didn't have the trauma going on necessarily, but it was so much other stuff, that other issues would happen, you know, with different siblings, you know, their marriage or relationships or something happening. So I would kind of always be in the background. And I thought some of that stuff was normal. So I hear people say, you know, well, this happened to me and I turned out fine. And it's like, well, you don't know how that affected you until you really sit down and think about it. And I know that as far as the touching, even though I knew some things happening, I knew about the abuse from, you know, that you grew up with. But then when you explained to me about the rape, that helped me understand, okay, that's why. And, you know, it helped me as far as like, now I can't take offense to her pulling away from me if I'm touching her, because that's a trauma experience, you know.
And that was, it made it difficult for me to, I always, and I still struggle with the idea of deserving or the worthiness. So I felt that at any minute something would happen. I can't trust the good, because at any minute something would happen. But thank God for time and therapy.
Yep.
And I think that I think that I had learned, and I was self-aware enough that a lot of stuff I had started to process before I started therapy. But it got to a point where, okay, I'm processing, I'm understanding, and I'm moving past certain things, and it's getting better. Yeah. But I wanted it to be, like, I want to thrive, not just live.
Right.
So therapy helped me really process and understand some of those things and the effects of some of those things.
I know for me, one of the most devastating losses I had was my father. He passed away in July 1st of 1996. And it was weird because, you know, of course my dad, he was my rock. That was my biggest supporter. He was the one that, you know, made sure I stayed on track in school as far as my grades. The one that, you know, in the previous episode I mentioned uh, about him coming to get me and beating my behind at school. But he was, you know, the one that wanted to make sure that I stayed on top of my grades, was doing what I needed to do. He was very involved in my life and also friendships and all that. So that was my main man. And my daddy dealt with heart issues for many years. I remember him in and out of the hospital. And I if I remember correctly, every Christmas, including the year before he passed, he was in the hospital at least 4 times. He spent at least 4 Christmases in the hospital. And, you know, it was mild stroke or heart issues or whatever. It was all heart related. And, you know, so, mind you, the Christmas prior to him passing, he was in the hospital. So then comes June of '96. He had some complications. You know, wake up in the middle of the night. Mom was like, "Got to take your dad to the hospital." Okay, all right. So, you know, it almost kind of like, it felt like it got routine almost, so to speak. So we get him to the hospital. They do some type of procedure, get him straight or whatever. And he's in the hospital for like a week. And so everything's going on. Life's still going on. I was in school. I was going to technical school. And I was working at a car dealership. And so anyway, didn't go to work that week. You know, trying to deal with him. His death. His not his death, but dealing with him and being in the hospital. And so I'll never forget when my grandpa called me, and he was like, "Pop, you need to get to the hospital. Your dad's not doing too good." So I'm like, okay. So I go pick up my niece, and we head down to the hospital. And I just never forget, man, walking up to the hospital. My pop was out there he met us out there from the hospital. And he said, "Pop, I just tell you, Daddy didn't make it." He had some type of procedure he had done, and I was like, I was just numb. You know, of course, my niece, you know, she was his baby. You know, and of course she lost it. And I didn't believe it until I walked in, and I remember walking into the ICU, and he was laying there, and I remember seeing that. That was, you know, an experience in itself. And that's probably the first time I actually fully dealt with death, from, you know, going somewhere, hearing about it, and actually being there. And that was kind of, you know, it just looked like he was asleep, you know. And I remember, you know, still touching his hand, still, you know, just talking to him like, "Dad, I'm gonna miss you." You know, love you. And I still didn't understand what was going on. And then, you know, going through, and this was the time in my life where I was just like in that stagnant stage, you know, trying to figure out what the hell am I gonna do with life. I was going to school, didn't know really what I was going to school for. Working at a car dealership, like, man, what am I doing? So, of course, you know, during that time, you know, I did partake in some substance abuse. Not any hard substances, but, you know, marijuana here, you know, drinking, of course. And had a pretty bad spout with that for about a month. Just doing that and probably nothing else. Lost my job because I was, you know, dealing with Daddy, hospital and all that. And then, you know, the relationship I was in, she decided she didn't want to be with me no more.
No comment.
So all that happened in the span of in 6 months, you know, 6 month span. But it was difficult because I felt like, you know, that was my guide. So now my guide is gone. What am I really going to do? And, you know, missing him was like, okay, how do I? So I had to remember. So it caused me to pull up some of those things he taught me. Okay, well, now I got to do this, and it became about making him proud of me. And that was the drive. So I knew I had to straighten myself up, get myself together, but still trying to figure out how to live this life of mine. And then, after 96 is when you and I got together, and the rest was history.
Do you feel like you have made him proud?
I think I do, but I still wonder. It's something inside me, wants to hear it from his voice. Like, hear him say that to me. And I know that's not reality. I know that's not possible. Well, I mean, today's time with technology is probably possible, but I with AI and everything, but I deep inside I want to hear it, but I know without a shadow of a doubt he's proud of me. And I just think about the kids, and he would have. I mean, the kids were spoiled as they were.
Oh gosh, yes. Oh my
their nana. But if Popeye Curtis was alive, oh my God, that'd spoil Central. They'd have been. I can't even imagine them being more rotten than they were, but they would have been something else. But I know he's proud. I know he's smiling, wherever he is, looking at me and saying, "Yeah, I did a good job." So
he did.
I feel that way.
He did.
So all these things happened before we were married, but had a big impact on our marriage and how we dealt with each other and the kids.
So since we've been married, there have been some traumatic events and some deaths that have also affected how we perceive things, how we see things, and then also how we were with each other and how we helped each other through those things.
Mm-hmm.
I think the first major loss we experienced after marriage was my grandmother.
Yes.
And she was my father's mother, and we were very close. I grew up very close proximity to them. Mm-hmm. And in those times when home was too difficult to deal with, that was my refuge, my grandparents. And when my grandfather passed away, I was 15, and my grandmother moved in with us. So we actually lived with her in my teenage years. Mm. But she was a mother figure. She represented safety for me.
Yeah.
And so losing her was difficult, but I also remember her and my mother were also close, and my mother's words were, you have to be strong and help me deal with this. So I don't know how much I even processed that loss because I was being strong.
I remember, from the day that I met her, was open arms. Mm-hmm. And I remember she knew you were pregnant before we even.
Yep.
Because she started calling me Dada.
Yeah.
And it was funny. I remember going up there and visiting. She'd do the little slip.
Yeah.
She'd do the little slip. Like we was making a dope deal or something.
That's right.
That's money or whatever.
She greased my palms.
Yeah, greased my palms. And boy, she always tell us about the telemarketer that called.
Oh my goodness. Any telemarketer that called and asked her how she was doing, they got the full story.
Oh yeah. Well, my right eye ain't doing too good.
So that was and That was very early. Our son was
Yeah, he was
just over a year
I don't know
old,
if he was
and
two
so
yet.
we were. That was very early into it. A few years after that, my half sister, she and I had just started to develop a closer relationship, and she passed away unexpectedly. And that was difficult for me because we didn't have that relationship growing up, and I felt like, we just started getting close, and now she's gone.
Yeah.
We had my mom's death, which was very unexpected, and the timing of it. It was 3 days after my birthday. We were supposed to be going out to dinner to celebrate my birthday, and she was just at the house the night
before.
right, and we had talked about it. She had an appointment, and
We'll go out to eat for your birthday. I remember she called me like that Tuesday, and she was like, "What do you do for Margaret's birthday?" I was like, I ain't playing too much. Maybe go out and get something to eat. She said, "Well, you ain't had nothing planned?" I was like, "No." And she was like, it sounded like she was kind of worried about it. You know what I'm saying? And I was like, well, and she said, well, I'll talk to her and see and come up with something.
I think she was. So I'm not big on birthdays and holidays and things. I'm just not big on that. But she was.
Yeah.
And so she was upset that I didn't want to go anywhere that evening.
Oh yeah, that's right.
But it was a Tuesday. I didn't want to go anywhere that evening.
I was working, and I was on days.
Right, and so I said, well, we'll just go Friday. We'll go. There used to be a seafood buffet that we'd go to.
Yeah.
And I said, we'll just go there Friday. And so she was, I think, a little bit frustrated with me because she wanted to go that evening. And we talked about her appointment the next day.
Yeah.
And
so she was at the house that Thursday. They went up to grandma's.
Yep, she had the kids.
The house.
And she had an appointment coming up that next week, and we discussed who would take her for that appointment because I don't know what they were doing. But it never occurred to me about the one that she had the next day because she was getting allergy testing. And I was telling her how when I did the allergy testing, they had to give me Benadryl. And so, I don't know, but so that was unexpected. That was difficult. Being an only child, like that, I felt like nobody else could grieve with me in that way.
Yeah.
And that was hard.
She was our rock.
Yeah.
I know it was difficult for me because, I remember the day, and I remember we were, I think we were sitting up and just gallivanting through the day because I was off.
Yeah, we were on the couch napping.
We was on the couch napping. And I just remember getting a call from your uncle. It's like, okay, well, what are you calling me for? And he was like, Byron, are you anywhere near Margaret? And I was like, yeah. He said, I need you to walk away from her. Immediately, my heart just went to pounding because I'm like, oh, crap, what is going on? And I went outside, and he was like, Hilda was in the car wreck. Bad car, y'all need to get down in NCG. And I struggled with saying something to you because I already knew that she was gone, but I didn't want. Do I say something to her now? And mind you, like the hospital is like
20 minutes,
25 minutes from the house at the time. So I say something to her now about it, and I just remember saying, Zach, your mama had an accident. Zach said we need to come down there to the hospital. And I was hoping you wouldn't ask me while we was on the way down there. Because I was just like... I remember parking, walking up. You didn't say a word.
I didn't say anything because I felt something.
Like you felt like...
Yeah. I didn't say any... We rode in silence.
Yep.
And I think I said something like, I'm going to tell her if she didn't want to go to dinner, she didn't have to do all this.
Yeah.
But I knew not to say anything. I knew not to ask anything. And it was difficult. And I'm so thankful that, because she and I had a rocky relationship. And I'm so glad that we were in a good place at the time.
Right.
We were in a very good place. I think we had both come to a place of understanding with each other on some things.
Yeah.
So, but that had a big effect on me. And honestly, though, of course, the loss was difficult, but there was a level of I could breathe on some things, if that makes sense. I guess maybe I didn't have to be strong for her anymore, if that makes sense.
And also we knew that she was suffering physically with different health issues. I think she had shoulder pain or something like that.
She had hidden a lot from us too. I knew she was diabetic. She'd been diabetic for years.
Yeah.
I did not know she was on insulin until cleaning out her stuff. I didn't know it had gotten to that point.
Right.
So she had some emotional and mental health things that went unchecked.
Yeah.
And so I just I don't know. It was a very surreal thing.
Yeah.
And she was very involved. We lived very close to her. She was very involved with the kids. And it was definitely like you knew she was gone. Her presence was gone. And that was hard, and having to do all the arrangements and planning and things like that. And I guess it kind of helped us, though. It somewhat prepared for it when a few years later. Completely different circumstances, but your mom's passing. She was sick for a while.
Kind of like my father, kind of like in and out of the hospital with different health issues related to blood pressure, heart, things like that. I've taken her to the doctor sometimes. I've taken her to doctor's appointments, or I remember she had recently had like a back surgery, and I remember taking her to a follow-up appointment. That's what it was, I think. Or follow-up appointment, yeah. My sister went with us. And she, kind of like the same thing, just she wouldn't exercise like she needed to, she was complaining about the medications all the time. That's one of the things she complained about a lot. I don't want to take all these medicine. I had to take medicine for this, medicine for that. It was always complaint. I'm like, well, Mom, you got to do something. You got to get up there and walk, That
was something that you and your siblings had a hard time with.
Yeah.
But my thing was she had her mental faculties, and as an adult, she's letting you know. Like I don't want to do all of these things. I'm tired, and I know that we want to. We become the parents, and we want to step in, and
it's almost like you're almost like led to be like, well, if you ain't gonna take care of yourself, I don't want to sit here and watch you. So then I would leave and not talk to her for a couple of days because I'm like, I don't want to hear, or I hear the complaints, but then
But you don't want to.
You don't want to do nothing about
Right.
it. So what do you do? Like, and I've encouraged, like, I'll come get you and we'll go for a walk, whatever. Call. I don't feel like it. They did. Baby, I'm up. Stayed up all night. And it was always the excuse. So it's kind of like, and it was sad, but at the same time, I understand you can't make somebody do what they don't want to do.
Right.
But when she went in the hospital that last time, she had to have a procedure done, and for some reason, I don't know why, it was in the dead of winter, and they wanted her to come in for something. So I remember my brothers were taking her to the hospital, and she started seizing or something like that in the car. So my brother, he worked in the medical field, so he started CPR. And the time they called the ambulance, got the ambulance, my other brother was called the ambulance while they was on the way, got her there. So she slipped into a coma and never came out of it. And I remember, like, the doctors, talking to me and my brother one day when I went up there to the ICU, and he was like, basically, with all said and done, like, he was basically trying to tell us, like, look, Mama, she ain't gonna make it out of this. And if she don't, she's gonna be in the vegetative state if she does. Plain and simple. And I kind of accepted it, and I felt some of my other siblings kind of had a problem with it, but I'm like, I know the suffering she was doing. I know how she was suffering. And, I even thought about it. We talked about, would it be easier because, your mother was the first death I experienced that was like a tragic death, like being in a car accident.
Mm-hmm.
We never saw her again after that Thursday that she was at the house. We never saw her. We didn't have a chance to see her after the wreck because they recommended us not see her. So dealing with that or watching your parent die,
right.
What is the best,
But
is there a best way, or, you know what I'm saying? Like,
with your mom, that it was the summer before, because she was in the hospital, and I just remember it was right before school started because I was going to the hospital on a pretty consistent basis, and she was still at that point she was awake, but they had a tube down her throat, and she was a fighter. So when she would wake up and that tube was there, she would grab, and so they ended up having to restrain her. And I went in one day and I'm talking to her, and she's looking at me, and it was so hard to see her like that because I knew she didn't want to be tied down like that. She didn't want the tube and all of that stuff, and she was looking at me almost like a pleading, and I just tell her I know. I mean, but so that was difficult in and of itself, and that was several months before her death, and so like you said, we had talked about it after her death, which is, I don't want to say easier, but which is, which do you cope with better? And, to this day, we go back and forth because either way, it's a loss.
Either way, it's a loss, but it's like, I don't know, like, from a mental standpoint, watching the suffering is that better, or having that, at least I did have that last moment to a degree of
we were there. We were able to say goodbye. Versus, you get the call, and like you said, with my mom, the coroner he spoke against us seeing her until until the funeral home was able to get her ready. And my mom was a bit of a local celebrity, so the coroner actually knew her, and he was very compassionate when he expressed that, and he told me, he said, I wouldn't want my loved one to see me that way, and I wouldn't want to see my loved one that way. So
sure did.
That was, I know at the time I felt cheated out of an opportunity to at least, from TV and movies and things, you have this emotional, goodbye or whatever. Even with my grandmother, my mom and dad and I talked together about putting in a DNR with her. And so when she got to that point, we were able to see her last breath. Now that was comforting for me, though. Because it was a peaceful, non-labored thing. Like you could see it. But not having that with my mom, I felt kind of cheated, and I was like, what is this? You make plans, and then that's it. Nothing comes of it. So
it almost made me think about, like, when you see the experiences, like when you see that happen on television or whatever, you've never experienced it. So when you get to experiencing it, it's like, well, I mean, deep down inside, you're thinking like, well, I'm not nutting up, I ain't throwing stuff. Is that what I'm supposed to be doing? Or,
right.
Kind of like, well, I'm not as emotional as I probably should be.
Right.
And it's like, because I think a lot of times what people fail to realize is that sometimes with certain people, depending on the relationship, you've already made somewhat of peace.
Right.
Even before the passing, like, that, okay, they're hell-bent on not taking their medicine. So if they keep it up, it's bound to happen.
Right.
So it's like, let me prepare myself subconsciously, and there's no way you can really be prepared. And I just know with both experiences, with both my parents, it just hit me at different times. So like during, of course, the passing, it's like, well, I'm cool, I'm calm, everybody, how you doing? I'm okay. But it'll just hit you like, I remember, on the way to work one day and just listening to a song, and it just hit me.
That ball in the box.
It just hit me.
It hit the button.
Yeah. So I mean,
that's what. There are times when it comes back and it feels like it was, that day.
Yeah.
And helping each other through that throughout the years, we've both had to learn to be patient with each other. That was one thing. I had to backtrack when my mom died, because we got together the year after your dad died.
Yeah.
I didn't fully understand the impact of losing a parent until I lost a parent.
Right.
And so I had to go back and think, that was just a year later, not even. And, I wasn't cognizant of even checking in with you. I wonder how this affects him. I wonder how that affects him. Because I know for me, June 5th and December 6th every year, I go through some things. That's the day I lost her and her birthday. So that was several years down the line that I wasn't aware to check in with you on those times or whatever, or just to even be aware that stuff is how it would affect you. Of course, knowing it, there's an effect, but not fully understanding it. And I don't think anybody does until you lose a parent, especially that the one that you are plugged into.
Yeah.
And that was, sometimes it was not very functional. Sometimes it was a dysfunctional plugging into.
Right.
But nonetheless, my mom and I were, the cord was cut on that day. And so that was my parent that we were plugged in. I'm close to my dad now, and I am so thankful for that relationship now. But my mom was my mom.
Yeah.
And I know for you, your dad was your person. He was the one you were plugged into. So it was hard for me. And because of how I am, that realization for me made me mad at me. And I was frustrated with me because I felt like I didn't do right by you. And didn't recognize that I needed to be more understanding of that.
But you didn't need to, and I say that because like with my death experiences, I know for me it's not something that I relish on or think about on a consistent basis. It's usually a conditional thing. Like I remember crying one day because I saw a man and his father helping his father at lunchtime one day. That got to me. You know what I'm saying? But typically, his birthday around the time his death is pretty close because he died 9 days before his birthday. I don't really like get sad or relish at that time. It's just kind of like dad died. The ball is smaller because it's been so long. And even in those earlier years, I think I was so focused on us and our family life, making it better for us, that I just didn't think about it because it was like I was more focused on making sure that if anything I was going to live a life to make him proud. You know what I'm saying? Not like he passed away and then I getting the drugs or whatever. You know what I'm saying? I was more focused on that. So it's like I didn't think about it over the years as much, but there were moments, like I said, and there's still moments. It's like it hit me. I'm tearing up, and it's usually always at a time when I ain't got time to really on the way to work or something, or to an appointment or something like that. I ain't got time to cry. I can't got time to cry. I got to go clock in. But anyway, another experience we had was my father's mother. And I'm going to try to... My father's mother and my father's father, they're both gone on. But my father's mother, that was kind of like crazy for me. Because, my father's mother and my grandmother, she was a hard woman. She was hard. She's a tough-skinned type of woman. Put it to you like that. And, I remember... I remember when I took you over there the first time to meet her. And I'm introducing you as my girlfriend. And my grandmother says, during the meeting, what happened? Where's your other friend from Florida? Talking about my ex. She was that hard.
Yeah.
But, through the years, we would go visit them, here and there at their house. And I love Pop. Pop was like, if everything, it was Pop, my daddy, and then me, I guess,
Yep.
We were the men that, they taught me how to be men. Pop, I learned a lot from him as far as like, working on things, being outside the house. He used to come over there. I used to always like, Pop, what you doing? And he passed me that tool. pass me this, so that was my buddy there. And then, in the later years, of course, I got older, got my own family. He gave me words of wisdom, talking to me. Anyway, with grandma, she went in for like I think appendix ruptured or something like that. And
her intestine.
Yeah, her intestines ruptured, and she ended up having to be in a coma. And she went from there to a nursing home. And I remember, like, here's this woman that's been strong all my life. And, she used to take care of me when I was a baby. She went from that to almost like a child. And it was kind of odd seeing her in that light, Like, I remember vividly going to the last nursing home she was in. I like to stop by and check on grandma. And it was like, and I don't know if people have had experience with nursing homes, but, it was heart-wrenching sometimes because you're going there and you're seeing these people in there. And she was sitting out, like, in the hallway in a chair. Like, in the hallway in a chair. And I just remember, like, talking to her, like, hey, how you doing? And she looking at me. She wouldn't talk. She couldn't say anything. It's almost like talking to a little child, but it was heart-wrenching seeing these people there in that nursing home. And, like, and I used to wonder, like, when was the last time somebody came and checked on this person? Family member, whatever. But that was kind of tough seeing her in that light. And she finally went on. And then a few years later, about 5 or 6 years later, Grandpa, my main man, he went on, and that was tough. I remember him and I would get together here and there. I would take Grandpa to lunch, and I'll never forget. It was funny. I'm pulling up to the restaurant, and he decided he was gonna meet me. So I'm like, okay. No, he called me. Called me and said, Pop, you mind if my friend come along with us? I was like, friend? Well, what's up with that? So, I pulled up, and the lady is like sitting in the passenger seat, like facing him, and they talking and stuff. And I was like, okay. So we went and had lunch and everything. And she was a sweet lady. It was funny. But, just seeing your grandfather with your grandmother all your life, one day.
He out on a date.
Yeah, he on a date. So that was kind of a little odd. But Pop was my man, and, I was a great man, too, and really missing much. But and dealing with that was, like I said, that was kind of, that was a rough one. But I think the hardest one thus far was my dad. Because that was that pivotal moment in my life,
Mm-hmm.
But, and you and I experienced one together that was kind of it was an oddity. Back in 2010, I remember we were building our first house that we were building, and we were looking at this neighborhood, and I think you and I kind of had some differences because it was a particular house you wanted, and then it was the house that we had already decided on, and we were kind of battling. It's like the other house, I think they both were in our price range, I think, or maybe the other one might have been a little bit more. I can't remember.
The yellow house.
Yeah, the yellow house. What was it?
It was, there were things that you didn't like about it.
It was some things. I can't remember what it was. But at any rate, we were going back and forth about the houses. So I'll never forget one of my best friends. He called me during that day and I was asleep. We were staying with Hilda and Joy at the time. So I woke up and I was like, all right, let's see what he want. I called him and he was like, hey man, she passed away. I was like, what? She passed away. Like, wait a minute, man. I ain't hearing that correctly. What? Yeah, man.
His wife.
His wife, yeah. My best friend's wife. And that kind of,
They're around our age.
Yeah.
She had just had the youngest. They had the three kids. And the youngest was still a baby.
Still a baby. Yeah, still a baby.
And a year to the day before that, I had lost a student that I was close with.
Yeah.
It was the exact day, just a year later.
Yep. And I remember, I know that he just told me that, what happened. And I'm like, just sitting there dumbfounded, like, and I think you and I were like, well, we sitting up here having a disagreement about a house, and this man had lost his wife. Now, one of the things I remember that was kind of crazy was I think she was like the one that took care of all the household needs, paid the bills and things like that. And I remember going over there, checking on him one day, and him and I stayed up there for probably about 2 or 3 hours. He didn't know anything.
Yeah.
He was trying. He
set
didn't
up
even
the stuff and
know how to pay the power bill. So I had to, sit with him and show him how to, log on to the computer and get all that stuff straight. And that was kind of crazy. But, it's almost like when that happens, you just hit the ground running. Mm-hmm. Because,
I know that and still her death to this day, when if there's something that is gonna be irrelevant a week from now that I'm stressing about or what have you, I think about her and it's just I'm here.
Yeah.
So I need to make sure that I'm checked in to being here and using my time here because you just never know.
Yeah.
You just never know.
And my buddy, he's he hasn't remarried. The kids are growing up. It's been a joy watching them grow up and be successful. I think the middle daughter's in college now, and the youngest daughter's in high school. So it's a joy to see them grow up, but I know it would have been a whole lot better, with Mama being there. But,
of course.
He's had, help with, I admire the relationship that he has with her parents.
Because his parents, he doesn't, his parents have passed. That's right. That's
his
right.
parents were gone way before, and her parents stepped in, so they're heavily involved still to this day. But make sure the kids, when he has to go out of town or has to work long days, they'll go stay with Nana and Papa. And I just admire that, just, him having that support system, that helps. I'm sure it has helped him along the way dealing with things, even from getting, the girl's hair done, things like that. But,
so all of these are things that happened after we were married. And I think that we, of course, those things you deal with in the time, and it's kind of easier to help each other through those things.
Yeah.
It's supporting each other when the effects of the before stuff comes up. That I think was a challenge because first of all we have to share what's wrong in order to know, okay, well, I need to be supportive in this moment and understand that this is coming from somewhere else.
And it also helps with knowing if there's a current situation that comes up, then it helps. Okay, you're upset right now, so I'm gonna be here, but I'm, I have to keep asking, what's wrong? What's wrong? Well, why does that bother you? Why does that bother you? It's an understanding. So okay, well, I know to just sit here and be quiet, or I know to sit here and support, or.
And that's and I've always felt that support. I never felt like I am burdening you or anything like that because of you. Now, if I felt that way, it's because of me. But you never made me feel that way. You've allowed me to share with you things that have happened in my time. You didn't force it. You didn't, give me any constraints or barriers to, you got to do this or whatever. So that patience I've appreciated. And when I decided to start with therapy, it wasn't like you were supportive of that.
Yeah.
You didn't, it wasn't a good because now we can see what's wrong. Well, now we can finally get you fixed. It wasn't anything like that. It wasn't why would you need to do that? That's what crazy people, like, it was just support. If this is what you need to become a better you, then, I support that.
And I know for me, I have grown to understand that that we all need some type of therapy or counseling because we've all experienced trauma in growing up. Growing up black in this society, we've experienced some type of trauma. So now, not to mention family trauma and trauma as an adult, so it's like, dealing with those issues, I think it helps everybody to have some type of counseling. So, I mean, understanding that, it when you said, well, I'm going to counseling, I was at full support. It's like, well, and then even when I even mentioned that I needed to do something, I need to go talk to somebody. And that helped tremendously because it helped me even bring up some of that stuff that I suppressed, that I wasn't dealing with or talking about. I was just like, well, just keep going and pushing it down. But you got to get it out there. You got to get it out there.
We also have realized that the source of an issue causes reactions and causes you to do and say things, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's the person that you're doing those things to. So I may be upset about something and I may take it out on you, but it has nothing to do with you. It's whatever issue or concern.
Right.
Thankfully, I don't think that that's something that we've had to experience a lot. We've had issues, and then when we realize what the issue really is, we've supported each other through that.
Yeah.
So I think that that's important also, is to not take things personally, to remove that part from it, and to realize that, okay, something else is going on, and I'm going to help and support you through this. Not I'm going to be upset because of what you did or said, and you just deal with it on your own.
Yeah, and also realizing that, after the incident, there are going to be times that, it's going to come up, or there's going to be, times where sadness will set in. And, even though, like, even those times that I was on the way to work and I lost it, I was able to tell you, I was on the way to work and I was listening to such and such, and, I just had a moment. And, just being able to say it, it's a lot. It's sad that some people, I think about, like, just people who are single, or just, for example, that, they go through stuff and just don't have something simple like that to share. Like, my mom passed away, I lost her, and I was emotional today. And some people don't have stuff like that. Someone to share something that simple with. You know, so it definitely is a blessing. And you are a blessing to me, and I thank you, B.
Aw, thank you.
You're welcome. All right. In this Let's Discuss It, we want to talk about blended families and how the adults' choices affect children involved.
All right, so both of us come from blended families, and you tell me, what is your family structure?
All right, so I'm the youngest of 10 children. My father had 2 boys from a previous marriage. I'm the only one that is between my mother and father. And my mother had all the other children. And there are 3 boys and 3 girls. And we did have a sister that passed away before I was born. She drowned in the pool. That's pretty much our family dynamic.
Okay. For me, I grew up as an only child. I am the only child that my mom and dad had together. I had 1 half sister and 2 half brothers that my dad had with the same woman. And when I was 19, I literally stumbled upon another brother, or half brother, that my dad had with someone else. So my dad had 5 total. I've since lost my sister and one of my half brothers. Although I grew up as an only child, I did know of my half sister and half brothers.
Okay.
And as children, we were around each other some, but not a lot. And then my mom and their mom didn't get along. So eventually, when we were adults, my sister and I got closer, and then she passed away. So because of our ages, because we were the children in the situation, the adults had control of whether or not we would have any type of relationship.
Yeah.
And so seeing how your family, like, you all don't refer to each other as half or step siblings.
Yeah, I never did.
And you weren't raised that way. Your parents raised you all to be brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
And being that you grew up that way, you have those connections with your siblings. And for me, I didn't have that. And I'm realizing how that affects me as I get older.
Right.
And it's not something that, like, every day I'm thinking about it and get sad. It's nothing like that. It's just, it's little things that are frustrating for me. I don't have that bond or connection with another person because I didn't grow up with my siblings. And that doesn't, that feeling of loss doesn't necessarily go away. The brother that I learned about at 19, we're cordial, and we communicate via Facebook, but there's no, like, sibling connection there. And I mean, that's a difficult thing when it's not because of us, it's because of the adults involved.
Yeah. I know with us, I grew up, I had 3 brothers in the house. I had 2 brothers that would stay, my dad's boys. They mainly stayed with my grandmother for a good little while, my grandmother and grandfather. So we would go visit them, or they would come stay with us on the weekends. The 4 I grew up close with. Now, some of them were grown and adults and already had their own lives and already own families, but through having family functions, get-togethers, things like that, we saw each other on a frequent basis. So it was like, and I did have a sister whose husband was in the military, and when they would get leave, they would come home because he was from here also, and a lot of times they would stay with us when they were here. So some of those their children I'm close with because we kind of almost grew up as brothers and sisters. Some of them are actually older than me.
Mm-hmm.
But so there's that. We've maintained that level of closeness throughout the years, and have been able to still to this day. We'll get together periodically. We all got families now, but we'll get together and gather at Mama's house and grill, cook out, and have a good time or whatever.
So, seeing how you have children who have maybe have different fathers or different mothers,
Mm-hmm.
now seeing that and realizing how as an adult that has played a role in my life, I think it's so important that the adults in situations be adults.
Right.
I'm glad that our children don't necessarily have to experience anything like that.
Yeah, definitely.
Unless there's something that you need to tell us.
I don't see being on Maury.
I'm just saying,
at no
but
point in time. Well, Maury ain't even there no more, but
I'm thankful they won't have to deal with that. But
yeah,
it's so important that the adults in the situation be adults, and you have to put differences aside and make sure that these kids know they need to know who their people are. So that was
I do remember, like, throughout the years, like, when some of my when my father was alive, and I remember some of my siblings fathers coming around or coming to the house, and it was, as far as I could understand it, it wasn't a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? But they, depending on the relationship or however it wasn't a frequent thing.
Mm-hmm.
But it was, my dad never said, like, all right, you can't, your daddy can't come over here.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So, but it was one of those type things that I saw it over time, and there again is one of those things I thought, well, that should be normal,
Right, and it should be.
It should be, but,
it should be.
Now, as an adult, people I know, friends, different family situations, I see that that's not the case all the time.
But it should be.
It should be, because it always affects the kids.
Right.
And I'm thankful that I never had any kids before us for that reason in itself, because,
I don't think I would have handled it well.
I know, you probably would.
I wouldn't have.
When
we wouldn't be having this. We wouldn't be sitting here.
You had already told me that you wouldn't get involved with nobody that had kids.
I wouldn't. So we wouldn't be sitting here.
So if I had kids, you wouldn't even be with me.
Not at all. We would have remained friends.
All right. That's it for our Let's Discuss It. We didn't discuss the damn thing.
Thank you so much for joining us for episode 8 of the Beyond I Do podcast.
Please join us next time for episode 9, where we talk about communication and miscommunication.
In the meantime, make sure to check us out on Facebook and Instagram. Follow and comment. Let us know your thoughts about family structures and the effect on children and the adults that are involved.
And until next time, we will holler at y'all.